Gary, we'll get into the PM's speech, but look, you were a former citizenship immigration minister in the Howard years. I've got to get your thoughts on this Billa Wheeler family. A lot of pressure being applied from the government. Australia is one of a handful of countries in the world that actually take refugees and give them a permanent home, but you wouldn't know it from the way that it's being represented in the media. Where do you stand on the issue?
Well, Peter, I thought your commentary was faultless, as it always seems to be. You know, the needs of a few cannot outweigh the needs of a many. And the problem is that if you do go down the path of this kind of shrill appeal process, and their biggest mistake was going hyper-public. They would have been better off doing things quietly, and they might have been able to have put a case, but they put a case to the courts. The courts have found against them. There's plenty of points of appeal, but the shrillness should not deliver a result, because otherwise, Peter, we're going to have tens of thousands of people on leaky boats with children, or with pregnant women coming to Australia to try and test our resolve yet again. So you're spot on. You cannot do this. We've got to hold firm on this. And one other point, Peter, I've got plenty of friends who've come to Australia as refugees in their lifetime, or whose parents have come as refugees. Their status should not be diminished. Their legitimate status should not be diminished by this sort of shrill approach to this appeal.
I tell you, once you've touched this portfolio, you're very passionate. I worked for an immigration minister at one time too, and you understand right around the world there's such pressure on the movement of people. And once we have stopped the boats, we've done it twice here in this country, we cannot have it start again. OK, let's get into the PM's speech. In Perth today at the US Asia Centre, Chris, big speech about the rules-based world, standing up against economic coercion. No prizes for guessing who he was talking about. What did you make of his remarks?
Yeah, I listened to it in its entirety, and I thought Scott Morrison was on song today. I thought it was perfectly timed. I thought it gave an indication to those at the G7 where Australia would be situated. And it wasn't warmongering, as some who rang Talkback Radio this morning suggested it was. It wasn't bringing war to the table. It wasn't being disrespectful of the Chinese either. I thought it said that we don't circle around our nations and keep others outside of the circle, but it's got to be fair. And I think he hit the right note about giving more power to the World Trade Organization to enable the fact that countries like China who don't keep their trade agreements are punished, do face consequences, because as we know right now, China is facing no consequences and is using economic coercion to get their way. Not just with Australia either. It's happening all around the world. And I think that he will find a great deal of camaraderie and support when he gets to the G7 about these comments. It's not about bringing on a war or saying we should go to war or that China wants a war. It's about saying if you want to play with the big boys, you've got to keep to the rules, be fair, and we've got to have someone to police all of that. And no one is right now.
All right, let me play a grab, because it was beyond just the issues there about China and defence matters. It was a very broad-ranging speech. This is an environmental matter. Let's have a listen.
We will release our long-term emissions reduction strategy in advance of the COP26 in Glasgow. Performance, though, must count in this agenda as much as stated ambition. And we are on the pathway to net zero. Our goal is to get there as soon as possible, preferably by 2050. But we will get there through technology that enables and transforms our industries, not taxes that eliminate them.
He's creeping ever so closer to net zero by 2050. I know it's an election cycle we're in right now, but it's hard to keep both sides of the argument here, with him, isn't it, Gary?
Yeah, well, it's a dangerous thing about straddling a barbed wire fence like that, Peter, and that's the only criticism I have about Scott Morrison, that he kind of gets himself a bit either side of that rusty barbed wire. And I get the narrative that's being forced by the international left, the internationalist, and all the various fora, and he's about to go to one. I mean, Boris Johnson is as much an acolyte of this kind of loony, lefty, environmental screeching that's going on as anybody else. And he's talking about reform of the WTO. Well, I don't think he should stop there. There's a number of other fora that just seem to be dominated by those who want to weaken countries like ours in order to make other countries, like China, I'll say it, get away with it. They're allowed to get away with things that we can't do. We don't look at positive discrimination towards the free China. Taiwan, I mean, there is a country that wants to contribute to the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, all of the various other fora, and China says, oh, no, it's a renegade province. You can't talk to them, yet they have free and open democratic elections and a free press. You don't get arrested for having a different point of view in Taiwan like you do in China. So I think, we've got to take those values to international meetings, not just fall in with what the clever kids on the East River in New York say, the UN people. You just can't do that, Scott Morrison.
All right, let's go to Victoria. Likely tomorrow night at midnight that there will be the ending of the lockdown. A lot of restrictions stay in place. Finally, though, kids are back in the classroom as of Friday. It's extraordinary, some horrific statistics. We heard about mental health earlier in the week, but statistics out from Kids Helpline are showing that 16% of calls from children aged between 5 and 12 relate to suicide and self-harm. Chris, you've got young ones. Suicide, a kid 5 or 6 or 7 talking about suicide. When are we going to learn the lesson that lockdowns are such a huge problem for young people?
Yes, I don't think Victoria will, because you heard what Brett Sutton said today. We don't just simply rumble along with 2 infections. Well, you've got to rumble along with 2 infections because the repercussions of a lockdown are absolutely immense, mentally, economically. And I'm just sick to death of Victoria making decisions, making lockdowns their almost go-to strategy, and giving the idea that people are mentally strained by all of this and the economy is on its knees or beyond that, and giving that no consideration whatsoever. Even this weekend, to think that country Victoria misses out on a long weekend of revenue is outrageous, and reminds me of what they did on Valentine's Day when they decided, despite the preparations by hospitality small business, straight out the door, throw all your fantastic produce in the bin, it's all over, we're locking down again.
Awful.
And as we saw then, it was a waste of time. What we've seen with the latest lockdown hasn't been great discovery or a miracle due to lockdown. It's about better contact tracing and better isolation of a three-ringed contact tracing network. That's what has made this so successful. Yep. Lockdowns have got to be thrown away.
Well, a porous hotel quarantine down here is a problem, and I talked to someone who's living in an apartment block a little later in the show where the dirty linen from an infectious hotel is being stored right next to where they get in and out of their cars. I've got to go to you, Gary. Again, put your old minister hat on. What did you think of Peter Dutton, the revelations today, and he spoke to them in the package, pushed by Defence not to roll over and change the decision in relation to the meritorious unit citation for Afghan veterans. He said, thank you for your advice, but I'll make the decision, and as Minister, that will be put back on the breast of our soldiers. It's actually quite refreshing, isn't it, to see a minister take department advice, think about it, but in the end, make the bloody decision.
Absolutely. And Peter, good ministers, and you know what they're like. Good ministers should say to the department, give me options, tell me what you think, tell me this is what I think I'd like to see done. This is, by the way, what we promised at an election. This is philosophically what I believe. Give me options, make these options work, and let me then make a decision around that. A, B and C, A, B, C and D, whatever those options happen to be. Thank heavens for Peter Dutton. I mean, Peter Dutton is a good mate of mine. I don't apologise for that for a moment. I'm enormously proud of him having the guts, the gumption, and also the values to stand his ground on this stuff, because it passes every pub test, every common sense test. How dare you punish 99% of people in the military who have done nothing wrong other than serve our country and kept us safe, just because a couple have allegedly maybe done something, and that will be tested. And Peter's right. Let's throw the book at the people doing the wrong thing, let's not penalise everybody else. Because, oh, by the way, that's what Labor does. Labor punishes everybody. They lock everyone down because a couple of people get crook. They take medals off everyone because a couple of people do something wrong. Thank heavens for Peter Dutton.
My goodness, gentlemen, so much common sense. It's only Wednesday. Chris Smith, Gary Hargrave, thank you for your time.